It was the first Sunday of November, 1977. The storm clouds rolled in early that morning over Sylvan Ridge, casting a gray, ominous tone over the town's modest church. Inside the wooden chapel, lit only by flickering candles and weak autumn sunlight, pouring through stained glass, Pastor Elijah Moore stood at the pulpit with an intensity no one had seen before. He was usually calm, even poetic with his sermons, but that day, something had changed. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with a strange urgency. The congregation, many of whom had grown up with Elijah, noticed immediately. They leaned in, hushed and wide-eyed, as he flipped to Revelation 17 and began reading aloud about Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Elijah's voice rose with each verse, his hands shaking as he spoke of a city drunk on the blood of saints, and of judgment that would soon fall upon those hiding behind robes and ritual. At one point, he paused and looked directly at 3 specific members in the pews, men of wealth and power in the town, and then declared, "Some of you are not who you pretend to be. There is rot within these walls, and I will not let it grow any longer." The church fell into a stunned silence. No one dared move. Even the children, often restless during sermons, sat frozen. His eyes scanned the room again, and for a second, he seemed scared. Not of them, but of what he knew. After the service, as the congregation filed out awkwardly, whispering among themselves, Elijah refused to shake hands like he usually did. He remained at the pulpit, clutching his worn leather Bible, drenched in sweat despite the cold. Sister Mabel, the choir leader, approached him. She later recounted that he whispered to her, "Tonight, I'm writing it all down. If I don't show up tomorrow, go to my study. There's a second ledger." Mabel asked what he meant, but he just gave her a tired smile and said, "Pray for me." He walked out the back exit instead of the front and was last seen getting into his old Buick, parked behind the church near the woods. That evening, the storm hit hard. Thunder shook the windows of nearby homes and the roads became nearly impassable. But even as the wind howled, many in town couldn't stop thinking about that sermon. Some were angry, accusing Elijah of stoking paranoia. Others, like Mabel, felt something far more sinister, like Elijah had been trying to warn them of something dark. Something already moving beneath the surface of their town. Rumors began to swirl that Elijah had discovered financial irregularities in the church books, and that he had even confided in someone about a night meeting in the forest near Crooked Creek, a place long associated with old ghost stories and local superstition. By Monday morning, Elijah was gone. He hadn't shown up to the school, where he volunteered twice a week. The church doors were still locked. His house, left untouched. And the sermon tape that was usually recorded every Sunday, missing. All that remained was that fiery message, half prophecy, half warning, burned into the memory of every soul who sat in that chapel, and none of them knew then that it would be the last time they'd ever see Pastor Elijah Moore alive. The next morning, the townspeople of Sylvan Ridge slowly realized something was wrong. Pastor Elijah Moore wasn't answering his phone, hadn't returned home, and didn't appear at the community food drive he helped organize every Monday. By noon, a few church members grew concerned and went to check his small brick house on Walnut Street. The porch light was still on from the night before, his mailbox was stuffed with Sunday's newspapers, and his old dog Rufus was howling inside, hungry, agitated, and alone. But the strangest part, Elijah's car was missing. The man who never went anywhere without telling someone had simply vanished. That same evening, a pair of hunters stumbled upon an eerie scene along an overgrown dirt road that twisted through the backwoods between the church and the nearby hills. Elijah's 1965 Buick Skylark was parked off the path, almost hidden behind thick brush, as if someone had tried to make it disappear. The car doors were locked. The headlights were off, but the battery had died, indicating they'd likely been on all night. Inside, his hat was neatly placed on the passenger seat. On the driver's side, his leather Bible was wide open to the same page from Revelation he had preached from the day before. A single cigarette unlit rested on the dash, though Elijah was known to have quit smoking years prior. Deputy Roy Lancaster arrived at the scene shortly after and examined the vehicle. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away due to the wet mud from the storm, and no blood. Just silence. What caught the deputy's eye, though, was the glove compartment. It was open and empty. According to Mabel and others close to Elijah, he always kept a red notebook, their backup journal, in case he ever lost his sermon ledger. That journal was missing. Lancaster ordered a wide perimeter search that lasted until midnight, But with heavy fog descending on the forest, visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Locals joined in, but no one found a trace. No clothes, no torn fabric, no body. Elijah had seemingly vanished into the forest without leaving a single clue behind. As word spread, speculation took root quickly. Some whispered that he'd run away, afraid of the powerful men he'd exposed in his sermon. Others, more superstitious, spoke of the old grove near Crooked Creek, a cursed stretch of forest avoided by hunters and travelers alike, where strange lights had been seen flickering between the trees for generations. A few claimed that Elijah might have gone there, seeking answers or trying to gather proof for the accusations he made. But even in the age of local folklore, there was something deeply unsettling about how abruptly and completely he disappeared. Even trained dogs brought in from the county couldn't catch a scent trail. It was like he had never existed past that pulpit. In the days that followed, volunteers found tire tracks leading away from a nearby field, but they didn't match Elijah's Buick. Someone else had been there. But when authorities traced them, they simply stopped, as if the vehicle had turned back into the woods or vanished into the air. It made no sense, and neither did the silence that followed. No ransom note, no message, no sightings, only questions. A man who had spent decades building trust, preaching love, and helping the broken had disappeared just one day after delivering his most explosive sermon, and yet, no one seemed willing or able to find out where he went, or why. After the initial shock of Pastor Elijah Moore's disappearance began to fade, so too did the intensity of the search efforts. Within a few weeks, the official investigation stalled. No new evidence surfaced, no witnesses came forward, and no leads held any weight. The sheriff's department quietly shifted its focus to other cases. Church members held a few prayer vigils, and there was talk of forming a task force. But life in Sylvan Ridge slowly returned to its regular rhythm, at least on the surface. The pulpit at New Zion Baptist Church remained empty for months, draped in a black cloth, as if the building itself was mourning. Eventually, services dwindled. By spring, the church had closed its doors for good. The Moore family was devastated. His wife, Evelyn, moved to Georgia within a year, refusing to speak to reporters or authorities again. His brother, Thomas, spent months walking the woods with a flashlight and a shotgun, convinced Elijah had been taken perhaps by someone powerful. But after 2 years, he gave up too. Over time, the town stopped asking questions, and Elijah's name became a ghost, whispered only in back alleys and hushed dinner conversations. It was as if an invisible blanket had been laid over the truth. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one dared to pull the cover off. But not everyone forgot. Sister Mabel, now in her 60s, remained in Sylvan Ridge and never once accepted the story that Elijah had simply run away or wandered into the forest to die. She claimed, quietly and with conviction, that Elijah had been silenced. In the years after his disappearance, she kept a personal journal, documenting odd things she noticed. A councilman suddenly retired without explanation. A deputy transferred out of state under mysterious circumstances. A new church opened in town, funded by a donor no one could identify. Mabel never had enough proof to go public. But she held on to one belief: Elijah had found something big, something he wasn't supposed to, and that someone had made sure it stayed buried. The strangest part, according to Mabel, was how people changed. Men who once sat eagerly in the front row of Elijah's church started avoiding each other. Some sold their properties and moved away without warning. Others became more powerful, taking on new titles, buying land, and building businesses. Yet beneath all that prosperity, there was a tension in Sylvan Ridge that never fully went away. The forest where Elijah's car was found became overgrown and forgotten. The road leading to it was never paved, never cleared. No one hunted there anymore. No one hiked. Even children were told to stay away. The silence that hung over those woods wasn't just from absence, it was the kind of silence that follows something unspeakable. Years turned into decades, and the story of Pastor Moore became a local legend, half cautionary tale, half haunting mystery. New generations grew up hearing bits and pieces, most dismissing it as superstition. But for the few who remembered the man, the fire in his voice, the fear in his eyes, that last Sunday they knew something real had happened, something evil, and it wasn't buried with Elijah. It was still out there, waiting, watching. It was the fall of 2002 when Raymond Hicks, a seasoned logger from the nearby county, was contracted to clear out an abandoned patch of forest just west of Sylvan Ridge. The land had been untouched for decades, overgrown, tangled with vines, and littered with rotting stumps and deadfall. Most loggers avoided the area due to the unstable terrain and strange stories about the land being cursed or hollow. But Raymond wasn't the superstitious type. He believed in hard work, sharp tools, and daylight. So, with a chainsaw strapped to his back and a thermos of black coffee, he made his way deep into the grove, unaware that he was walking straight into the heart of a 25-year-old mystery. Midway through the second day, Raymond came across an old tree, stump twisted and wide, with moss growing thick along its base. It wasn't just dead wood, it felt wrong, like something had once burned around it, then regrown. He fired up his saw and began to cut through the outer layer, but just a few inches in, the blade struck something hard, metal, maybe. Sparks flew. The saw jolted. Curious, Raymond dropped to his knees and started digging through the thick mulch with his gloved hands. The soil was dense and foul-smelling, but beneath the roots, he found what looked like an old wooden box, half decayed and wrapped in something cloth-like, stained and rotting. The box was heavier than it looked. It took effort to yank it free. The cloth that had once covered it appeared to be a tattered piece of dark purple fabric, faded and weather-worn but still faintly embroidered with a golden cross. It was church cloth. Raymond, now uneasy, placed the box on a stump and slowly opened it, expecting maybe old family heirlooms or war medals. But what he saw made him stumble back. Inside the box was a gold wedding band, etched with the initials EM, a single yellowed page torn from a journal or sermon notebook, and a folded, blood-stained envelope labeled, "To whoever finds this." The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably deliberate. Raymond's heart raced. Something about the items felt intimate, sacred, and dangerous. He recognized the name, EM. Right away every local knew the story of Pastor Elijah Moore. Rumors of his vanishing were whispered in the bars and passed down by old-timers like ghost stories around a fire, but no one had ever found a trace of the man until now. Raymond didn't dare open the envelope himself. Instead, he rushed back into town and delivered the entire box to the sheriff's office. Refusing to be alone with it another minute, he said, "It felt like holding someone's death in my hands." The sheriff, now a different man than the one who originally investigated Elijah's case, examined the contents carefully. The envelope was sealed shut with what appeared to be dried blood. The note inside, when finally opened by forensic archivists, would shake the town to its core, but even before that, the weight of the discovery sent ripples through Sylvan Ridge. News spread fast. Old fears resurfaced. And deep in the woods, near that hollowed stump, a quiet dread settled in again. Because the box wasn't the only thing waiting beneath the trees. Something else, something far worse, was buried nearby, just a few feet from where Raymond had dug. After the box was handed over to authorities, the sheriff's department wasted no time involving the state forensic team. The artifacts inside were fragile but remarkably well preserved considering they'd been buried for over 2 decades. The wedding band, engraved with the initials EM, was confirmed by Elijah's surviving family members as belonging to him. It matched a photo from his wedding day. The page, crumpled and water-damaged, appeared to be torn from one of his sermon journals. Faint lines of ink were still legible. "The truth is heavier than any burden I've carried. But if I vanish, know this: it was no accident." Those words sent a cold shiver through everyone who read them, but it was the letter, the blood-stained envelope marked "To whoever finds this," that caused the deepest stir. Carefully opened by forensic technicians, the brittle paper inside revealed a message that Elijah had likely written on or just before the night he disappeared. The ink was faded but readable, and the handwriting matched samples from his sermons. It began with a haunting sentence: "They know I saw what I shouldn't have." From there, the letter listed a set of initials and vague references to places: Mr. BC, Crooked Creek, storage beneath the old pulpit, and most alarmingly, the children. They were never just missing. The letter was disjointed, likely written in fear and haste. It hinted at a network of corruption that stretched far beyond the church pews, mentioning church elders, business owners, and even someone within the sheriff's office at the time. Elijah had uncovered records, ledgers, hidden donations, and coded entries that pointed toward something horrifying. What exactly he discovered remained unclear, but one thing was evident: it was enough to get him silenced. He ended the letter with a chilling plea: "If I'm gone, dig where the roots run deepest. Underneath, the rest waits." The document wasn't just disturbing, it was dangerous. Officials debated whether to release it publicly, but before they could decide, the contents were leaked first to a local reporter, then online. Overnight, Sylvan Ridge became the focus of statewide attention. Journalists swarmed the town. People came forward with old suspicions. And a retired deputy anonymously confirmed that the proffered investigation in 1977 had been shut down from above. Panic rippled through the community, especially among the older families who had held influence in the town for decades. Some called the letter fake, a hoax to stir up ghosts, but others, especially those who had long believed Elijah's disappearance wasn't random, knew better. Back at the forest site, investigators returned with cadaver dogs, combing the surrounding area near the tree stump where the box had been. Found the letter's final cryptic words, "Dig where the roots run deepest," were taken as literal instruction. And within just a few hours of searching, one of the dogs stopped at a patch of earth, roughly 15 feet from the original location. It began to dig frantically. What they unearthed next would confirm Elijah's worst fears, but also raise far more horrifying questions than anyone was prepared to face. The moment the cadaver dog froze, pawing and whining at the base of a damp, moss-covered slope, the search team knew they had found something significant. The soil there was unusually loose, as though it had been disturbed years ago and slowly settled back into place. Shovels hit the earth within minutes, and after just a few feet of digging, a heavy, rotting fabric was uncovered, deep maroon, trimmed with gold, like an old ceremonial robe. One of the younger deputies gasped. It was the same style worn by New Zion's pastors, back when it still operated in the late 70s. But what chilled the team was not the garment itself. It was what it wrapped around as the cloth was carefully peeled back. Human remains were revealed, partially mummified, preserved unnaturally by the cool, dry layers of packed earth and tree roots above. The bones were still articulated, as if the body had been placed there gently and deliberately. A cracked skull bore signs of blunt force trauma, likely from a rounded object. Maybe the handle of a tool or even the base of a candlestick. Around the neck, remnants of a clerical collar remained, stained and stiffened with age. It didn't take long for forensic analysts to match dental records. The body beneath the earth was Elijah Moore. After 25 years, the truth was no longer a rumor, it was now bones and blood in the dirt. What disturbed investigators even more was what they found next to the remains. Buried just inches away was a rusted iron cross, bent at the center, and a small wooden figurine of a child, with eyes carved wide in terror. Beneath the figurine, another scrap of parchment, nearly illegible, read only 2 words: "Forgive them." For a man known to carry himself with grace, hope, and resolve, the placement of such an object near his corpse felt like a tragic message, a symbol of betrayal, maybe, or perhaps a sign that he had tried, in his final moments, to show mercy to those who showed him none. State investigators cordoned off the area and began sweeping the surrounding land. Ground-penetrating radar revealed that this burial site was not alone. Several soft spots were detected along a winding path of ancient oak trees, each one suspiciously aligned in a crescent arc near the edge of Crooked Creek. Quiet speculation began to spread. Had Elijah found more than just corruption? Had he stumbled across a burial ground, a hidden graveyard for victims the town refused to see? Officials refused to comment publicly, but off the record, one investigator was overheard saying, "This wasn't just a dumping ground. This was planned, ritualized, and whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." The town of Sylvan Ridge began to fracture under the weight of these discoveries. Some residents demanded the old church be exhumed and searched, believing it still held more secrets beneath its floorboards. Others denied everything, calling the remains planted, the letter forged, and Elijah a troubled man who got in over his head. But the forest didn't lie. And the bones under that tree stump didn't lie either. Pastor Elijah Moore hadn't walked into the woods and vanished. He had been silenced, buried, and almost forgotten. And now, piece by piece, the darkness he tried to expose was clawing its way back into the light as news of the body's identification broke. The quiet town of Sylvan Ridge exploded with shock, anger, and fear. For years, many locals had clung to the idea that Pastor Elijah Moore had simply walked away. That may be the weight asterisk of his work had broken him, or he'd suffered a mental break and vanished. But now, those comforting theories dissolved. The truth was undeniable. Elijah had been murdered, buried like a secret under the forest floor, and silenced before he could finish revealing whatever dark truth he'd uncovered. The letter, the body, and the strange symbols found nearby told a story far more disturbing than anyone was ready to hear. As investigators dug deeper into both the earth and the town's history-long buried rumors began surfacing again. A retired councilman, speaking under anonymity, claimed Elijah had presented evidence in 1977 that linked church funds to a secretive property trust outside town limits. That land, it turned out, was located near Crooked Creek. Documents had mysteriously vanished after Elijah's disappearance. And those same properties were now owned by shell companies with no public ties to any one person. All of them shared a common pattern: large fences, no trespassing signs, and zero known use. Locals began speculating about what lay beneath those buildings or what once did. The town's historical archives, when reopened by outside journalists and investigators, revealed even more troubling findings. Between 1968 and 1977, at least 9 children were reported missing from surrounding towns: runaways, orphans, foster children. Most cases had quietly been closed, chalked up to lack of evidence or no foul play suspected. But new forensic software used on old police files found that several of these children had last been seen near Sylvan Ridge, in institutions that had received quiet funding from New Zion Baptist Church. None of these disappearances had ever been publicly connected. Until now. Even more shocking were the names that began appearing again and again in the paperwork. Former deacons, council members, 2 deputies who had since died, and one man, still living, Franklin DeWitt, an elderly real estate broker who had once been the treasurer of Elijah's church. His signature appeared on multiple ledgers, now revealed to contain coded entries and falsified donation records. When reporters confronted him at his estate, he refused to comment. But that same night, a fire broke out on one of the unused properties, tied to his name. By the time emergency crews arrived, the entire building had burned to the foundation and inside. Remnants of what appeared to be charred filing cabinets and scorched lockboxes were found. The town, now under a national spotlight, began to crumble from within. People who once attended church together now eyed each other with suspicion. Former allies turned silent. A growing number of residents began moving out, some overnight. But through all the chaos, one truth had finally been unearthed. Elijah Moore hadn't been paranoid. He hadn't been delusional. He had discovered something horrific, something rooted in decades of silence, power, and hidden sin. And though he hadn't lived to expose it, the things he left behind were now tearing the illusion of Sylvan Ridge apart. One secret at a time. Pastor Elijah Moore was buried in silence, but his truth refused to stay underground. For 25 years, the forest held its breath, guarding a secret it didn't want found. But truth, real truth, has a way of clawing its way through rot, through lies, through fear. What Elijah uncovered cost him his life. But in the end, it exposed a darkness that had been allowed to fester in plain sight. He may not have lived to see justice, but he planted the seed for it: one journal, one letter, one box beneath a tree stump. And now, the town of Sylvan Ridge can no longer pretend it doesn't know, because now, we know. And the forest no longer whispers. It screams.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.